In the still of the night in Gotham City, a legend was born from tragedy. A young Bruce Wayne, having witnessed the loss of his parents, made a solemn vow to rid his city of the darkness that took his family. Thus emerged Batman, first introduced to readers in 1939's Detective Comics #27. In those early stories, Batman, as he was originally spelled, was a mysterious vigilante, a dark figure in a long cape and cowl, referred to as the world's greatest detective for his sharp intellect. Co-creators Bob Kane and Bill Finger crafted this grim hero, though for decades only Kane received credit. It was not until 2015 that Bill Finger's name was finally officially recognized alongside Kane's as Batman's co-creator. This long overdue credit gives many fans peace, knowing the man who helped shape so much of Batman's mythos is finally acknowledged. Let's gently turn back the clock to those early days. Bruce Wayne's very name is a tribute to history. Writer Bill Finger chose Bruce after the Scottish hero Robert the Bruce and Wayne after American Revolutionary General Mad Anthony Wayne. By day, Bruce was depicted as a bored, wealthy socialite, an image to mask his secret life. By night, he became Batman, channeling his childhood pain into protecting others. Commissioner James Gordon, the police detective who forms a trusting bond with Batman, actually appeared in that very first 1939 story as well. From the start, Batman was not entirely alone in his crusade. He had an ally in the Gotham City Police. One can imagine, as the narrator softly describes, the very first panels of Batman's comic life, a dark silhouette on a rooftop, and Commissioner Gordon marveling at this strange, formidable ally. In the quiet of those Golden Age panels, Batman's methods were harsher than we know today. The early comics portray a Batman who carried a handgun and sometimes used deadly force, a stark contrast to the strict moral code he developed later. In one 1939 tale, he even fired silver bullets to destroy a vampire menace. And in another case, he sent an evildoer plummeting into a vat of acid, coldly remarking it was a fitting end for his kind. These grim actions were gradually softened as the character evolved. Once Batman gained a youthful partner to care for, his lethal edge faded. He swore off guns and lethal force entirely, establishing his famous no-killing rule by the 1,940 seconds. From then on, Batman's mission became one of justice, not vengeance, a crucial shift that allowed readers to see his compassionate core. Even as you drift to sleep, you might picture Batman gently laying aside his flyarm, vowing never to take a life, and instead using more humane methods to fight crime. 1 year after Batman's debut, in 1940, the comic pages lit up with the introduction of a bright splash of color and optimism. Robin, the boy wonder. Dick Grayson, a circus acrobat orphaned by criminals, was taken in by Bruce and became the first Robin, wearing a red, green, and yellow costume like a cheerful beacon at Batman's side. Robin was created to be a light in Batman's dark world, someone for Batman to talk to, and a character young readers could relate to. His impact was immediate and profound. Robin's arrival in Detective Comics #38 was so popular that it doubled the sales of the series. Imagine that. The lonely dark knight now had a colorful young partner leaping alongside him, and readers embraced it wholeheartedly. The name Robin wasn't inspired by the bird, as many assume, but by the hero of Old English legend, Robin Hood, and the vivid red of Robin's tunic was drawn from classic Robin Hood illustrations. Together, Batman and Robin were often called the dynamic duo, and their partnership became one of the most beloved in comic history. In our soft exploration tonight, we can envision Batman and Robin swinging across moonlit rooftops, a perfect balance of shadow and light, solitary no more. In those early years, many pieces of the Batman legend quietly fell into place. In 1941, a few issues after Robin's debut, readers were finally shown Batman's origin story, the painful scene of young Bruce in Crime Alley, and the promise he made afterward. Interestingly, this backstory was first revealed not at the very beginning, but later in Detective Comics #33, 1939, almost as an afterthought to explain why this dark figure fights crime. It's a mere 2 pages long, but that tiny tale of tragedy and resolve became the heart of Batman's saga. We hear it retold countless times now. A mugger, later named Joe Chill, confronts Dr. Thomas and Martha Wayne, little Bruce's parents, and in that fateful moment, Bruce's world changes forever. That mugger was nameless in the first telling, just a faceless embodiment of crime. Only in 1948 was he given a name, Joe Chill, in a story where Batman tracks him down. In that later tale, Batman even reveals his identity to Chill, not out of anger, but to show the criminal the enormity of what he caused. Chill never escapes the consequences. Terrified, he ends up perishing at the hands of his own horrified henchmen once they learn he's responsible for creating Batman. But as you breathe calmly, we won't linger on violence. Instead, we focus on what came out of Bruce's tragedy, a lifetime of heroism, a symbol that even the darkest night can give rise to a guiding light. One such guiding light in Bruce's life was his faithful butler and confidant, Alfred. Interestingly, Alfred was not part of the very earliest stories. He made his debut in 1943, Batman #6, a few years into Batman's publication. Originally, Alfred was portrayed quite differently from the suave gentleman fans know today. In his first appearance, he was named Alfred Beagle, and was a portly, clean-shaven fellow with a bumbling demeanor, a bit of comic relief who fancied himself a detective. Despite his clumsiness, Alfred quickly proved invaluable. In his debut story, he accidentally discovers the Batcave hidden behind a grandfather clock, and thus learns Bruce and Dick's secret identities. Instead of betraying them, this kindly man pledges his loyalty and becomes their devoted butler and guardian. Over the years, Alfred's appearance and backstory were refined. By the 1950 he was reinvented as the slim, mustachioed British gentleman we recognize, and his surname was changed to Pennyworth. This change coincided with the popular 1943 Batman movie serial, where the actor who played Alfred was slim. DC decided to adjust the comics Alfred to match. Alfred's presence brought a warm, parental augury into Bruce's life. One can almost hear Alfred's measured, gentle voice assuring a young Bruce or tending to Batman's wounds late at night. Through countless nights, Alfred has been Batman's anchor, patching him up, serving him tea, giving fatherly advice, always there in the quiet moments. As the 1940 seconds progressed, Batman's world expanded softly but steadily. The secret headquarters we all know, the Batcave, was introduced a few years into the comics. Initially, Bruce operated out of a simple room or secret lab. But in 1943, the concept of a cavernous lair beneath Wayne Manor was shown to the public for the first time, not in a comic, but in a live-action Batman film serial. The serial featured a bat's cave, complete with bats flitting about. The comics quickly adopted this idea. By 1944, Batman had a proper Batcave in print, entered via that grandfather clock Alfred would tend. Picture it. A dusty limestone cave filled with the echo of dripping water, a giant penny and robotic dinosaur, trophies from adventures, eventually decorating its halls, and the soft hum of the Bat computer in the darkness. It became the sanctuary where Batman could be Bruce, where plans were made and wounds healed. In our dreamy tour, we wander the Batcave in silence, noticing the keepsakes of Batman's long journey, each with a gentle story of its own. That giant penny, for instance, came from a foiled robbery and was saved as a memento. The towering mechanical dinosaur was a souvenir from an island of dinosaurs Batman once encountered. Now it stands guard quietly in the cave, a harmless giant watching over Batman's solitude. From this shadowy cave, many wonderful tools and traditions emerged. Batman's utility belt, for example, was first shown in mid-1939, just a few issues into his debut. In one early story, he uses it to carry tiny glass pellets of choking gas. Over time, that simple belt grew into a trove of gadgets for every situation. Ropes and batarangs, bat-shaped boomerangs, which were introduced in 1939 as well, smoke bombs, lockpicks, first aid kits, and forensic tools all tucked into its pouches. Decades later, writers would add even more fanciful items to the belt. It's a running joke that Batman's belt has everything. Indeed, among its 10 compartments, you might find things as mundane as a flashlight or as extraordinary as a shard of kryptonite he keeps just in case he needs to subdue his mighty friend Superman. Ever prepared, Batman once admitted he carries kryptonite in his belt only as a contingency, illustrating how his pragmatism never rests. As you imagine Batman wordlessly gliding across rooftops, know that in those golden belt pouches lies a little bit of hope for every occasion, a reassuring thought that whatever problem arises, Batman has a gentle solution ready at hand. Even the famous Batmobile and Batplane came into being in those early years, though not in the dramatic ways you might think. In 1939, only 4 issues after his debut, Batman unveiled his first custom vehicle, not a sleek jet, but the Batgyro, a strange autogyro helicopter featured in Detective Comics #31. It had wings and rotor blades, a prototype of the Batplane, which ferried Batman to distant adventures. By 1940, in Batman's very first solo comic issue, Batman Has Shown, the Batgyro was replaced with a more plane-like Batplane. The Batmobile's origin was humbler. Initially, Batman just drove a normal-looking car. The term Batmobile wasn't even used until later. In early stories, like 1941's Detective Comics #48, his car was depicted as an ordinary red sedan. Only in the mid-1940s did the Batmobile evolve into a stylized, finned vehicle, emblazoned with a Bathead emblem on the front. By the 1952nd and 60nd, it became a fanciful blue roadster with a giant bat-face battering ram. Over the years, through many artists, the Batmobile has changed shapes and sizes. From slick sports car to tank-like armored tumbler, yet it remains a symbol of Batman's presence. One fun speck for the gearheads drifting off. An official manual once stated the Batmobile boasts a 10,000 horsepower engine. Imagine 8 high-end supercar engines combined. It's essentially a rocket on wheels. But in our lullaby, we picture not the roaring of the engine, but the gentle purr it might make as Batman patrols the quiet midnight streets, headlights off to avoid disturbing sleeping Gothamites, always watching over his city. Of course, as Batman's legend grew, so did his rogues gallery, the colorful villains that challenge him. The very first of these made his debut in 1940 and nearly didn't survive the issue. This was the Joker, introduced in Batman Haitian as a homicidal clown with a chilling smile. In that first story, the Joker was actually supposed to die. The writers meant for him to accidentally stab himself. But at the last minute, the editor Whitney Ellsworth intervened, sensing the character was too good to waste. A hastily added panel showed the Joker still alive in prison, and thus he lived on to become Batman's greatest nemesis. Imagine if that panel hadn't been added. We'd have lost decades of thrilling, if terrifying, Joker tales. But he was spared by editorial mercy, allowing him to torment Batman again and again as the clown prince of crime. Not all of Joker's early portrayals were the nightmare-inducing figure we know today. In the late 1950 seconds, due to strict comic censorship, Joker was softened into a prankster who committed goofy, non-lethal crimes. By the 1970 seconds, however, he returned to his menacing roots. One of the Joker's most notorious acts, which we'll tread lightly on in this gentle space, was the cruel death of Jason Todd, the second Robin, in 1988, and the paralysis of Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, that same year. Yet, even from those dark events, heroes rose anew. Jason would eventually be resurrected as the anti-hero Red Hood, and Barbara found new purpose as Oracle, guiding the Bat family from her computer banks. Thus, even the Joker's worst could not extinguish the Bat family's light. Also gracing the pages of Batman number 1940 was a more enigmatic foe turned friend, Catwoman. Introduced simply as the Cat, Selina Kyle was originally a glamorous cat, burglar in a green dress without a costume, who tangled playfully with the Batman. Their very first encounter saw Batman let her escape, perhaps hinting even then at the romantic tension that would develop between them. Selina eventually donned her famous catsuit and became Catwoman, complete with a cat-eared cowl. Across eras, she has transformed from an outright criminal into an anti-hero and love interest for Batman. In some stories and alternate worlds, Bruce and Selina even build a life together. On the parallel Earth called Earth 2, they marry and have a daughter, Helena Wayne. As you doze, you might imagine a softer side of their relationship. Rooftop meetings under the moon, a silent dance of bat and cat. Catwoman brings out Bruce's heart, reminding us that even a dark night can find love and tenderness. And indeed, on that parallel Earth, too, Bruce's happiest years were spent with Selina, and their daughter Helena grew up to fight for justice as the Huntress, literally born of the union of bat and cat. Batman's other villains each carry their own intriguing facts. In 1942 came the Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot, a waddling gentleman of crime with his trick umbrellas. And in 1943, Two-Face first appeared, Harvey Dent, the tragic district attorney scarred with acid. Two-Face's evil was so psychologically dark for the time that after a few 1,940 seconds appearances, DC actually shelved him for decades. For nearly 17 years, Two-Face did not show up in any new Batman stories. It wasn't censorship per se, but the idea of a hero's ally turned schizophrenic villain was deemed too grim in those innocent times. Not until 1970, one was Harvey Dent, Two-Face, finally brought back, reimagined under writer Denny O'Neil's pen to confront a more mature Batman audience. Similarly, the Scarecrow, Professor Jonathan Crane, who first menaced Batman in 1941, vanished after 1943. This creepy professor of fear using hallucinogenic gas didn't return until the mid-1960 seconds. Imagine, he sat out World War II, the atomic age, all of it, only to resurface and scare a new generation in 1967's Batman Hasson 89, his official Silver Age reappearance. It's interesting how these villains sometimes slept, like dormant seeds, until the time was right for them to sprout again in Batman's Garden of Nightmares. When they did return, they often came back stronger. Two-Face's 1970, one comeback, and Scarecrow's 1967 revival gave Batman some of his most celebrated battles, balancing the scales of gimmickry with genuine drama. Then there's the Riddler, Edward Nygma, who debuted in 1948 with a trademark question mark suit and mind-bending puzzles. After a couple of outings, Riddler too went into hibernation, but he had an unusually long absence. He did not appear again until 1965, a full 17 years later, when a single issue, Batman Hasson 7-1, revived him. Why then? Well, the producers of the upcoming Batman 1966 TV show were looking for a villain to feature in the pilot, and noticed the Riddler had not been used in ages. His resurrection in comics was quickly arranged, and soon Frank Gorshin would famously portray him on television in green bowler hat and suit. That TV show played a significant role in re-energizing many Batman characters, as we'll soon whisper about. For now, in our gentle chronology, we leave the 1940 seconds, with Batman having amassed a vibrant rogues gallery: Joker, Catwoman, Penguin, Two-Face, Scarecrow, Riddler, all introduced before 1950. Each would go on to test Batman in unique ways and become legendary in their own right. But in the quiet comfort of this narrative, we remember them as they were originally: quirky, intriguing comic book characters, springing from the imaginations of post-Depression writers, entertaining children and adults with puzzles and costumes. Perhaps you picture them less as terrifying criminals and more as colorful players on a stage, each teaching Batman and Bruce something about courage, justice, or even mercy. By the late 1940 seconds and into the 1950 seconds, Batman comics underwent some whimsical transformations. The world was changing, and with it, comic book tastes. The post-war era saw a boom in science fiction and a wave of concern over comic book content, spearheaded by the 1954 Comics Code Authority, which discouraged gore and horror. To adapt, Batman's stories in the 1950 seconds became fantastical, almost dreamlike. In this period, Batman encountered aliens and robots. He traveled through time and got caught in bizarre transformations. These yarns were not meant to be taken too seriously. They were imaginative adventures for a more light-hearted time. One delightful example is the tale of the Rainbow Batman. In Detective Comics #4 1957, Batman inexplicably starts wearing a different colored batsuit each night. One night red, the next night blue, then yellow, orange, green, a whole spectrum of batsuits. The sight must have been astonishing. Batman, usually cloaked in somber gray and black, suddenly parading around Gotham in neon hues. But of course, even this silly premise had a thoughtful reason. Robin had injured his arm while saving a little girl, and Batman feared that if criminals noticed Robin's arm in a sling, they might deduce Robin was actually young Dick Grayson, who had been seen with an arm injury. So Batman drew all eyes to himself by wearing those flamboyant costumes, diverting attention from Robin. He literally became a rainbow, a beacon, to protect the one person he considered family. It's a charming, gentle story when viewed through that lens. Batman enduring playful embarrassment out of love for his partner. One can imagine the bemusement of Gotham's citizens. Look, Batman's bright pink tonight, even as they never realize the quiet care underlying it. Another fanciful gem from 1960. Zebra Batman. In Detective Comics #275, Batman and Robin face a magnetically powered criminal called Zebra Man. In the confrontation, Batman is zapped by the villain's device and finds his body emanating intense magnetic waves, visible as black and white stripes covering his form. He literally becomes a living magnet who repels all metal and even people around him, and his batsuit is patterned in wild zebra stripes from head to toe. It's an absurd predicament. Our hero can't get near anyone without knocking them over with magnetic force. Ultimately, with Robin's help, Batman uses the magnetic powers to defeat Zebra Man, and then finds a way to neutralize the charge. Afterward, he's back to normal. But that story left us with the delightfully surreal image of a striped Batman standing alone, unable to hug his friends. In the context of a bedtime story, it almost feels like a whimsical fairy tale. The knight who was cursed with a magnetic aura until he learned to control it and used it for good. Many such silly Batman stories of the 50 seconds have a warm innocence to them, perfect for a gentle exploration. They remind us that Batman's world can be full of wonder and not just darkness. Underneath the camp, the core values remained: heroism, loyalty, cleverness in solving problems. In those striped pages of Zebra Batman, Batman demonstrated his ingenuity by finding a non-violent way to win, and Robin showed steadfast faith in his mentor. We can drift through those candy-colored adventures, knowing all will end well, with Batman and Robin sharing a friendly laugh back in the Batcave about the night Batman had to be a zebra. Around this time, Batman's extended family in the comics was growing too, largely in response to societal pressures. In the mid-1950s, a psychiatrist named Dr. Frederick Wortham wrote a book, Seduction of the Innocent, accusing comics of harming youth. Among his claims was the suggestion that Batman and Robin's living arrangement could imply things that were, to 1952nd sensibilities, scandalous. He insinuated an inappropriate subtext of them being two males in a household. This prompted DC to introduce some changes. They wanted to reassure readers and overzealous critics that Bruce Wayne's home was a wholesome place. So, in 1956, the comics brought in a new female costumed hero, Batwoman, Kathy Kane. Kathy was a spirited heiress and former circus performer who decided to emulate Batman, partly out of admiration, and yes, partly to woo him. She donned a bat costume of her own, complete with a bright purse of bat gadgets, and fought crime in her fashion. Batwoman was written as a potential love interest for Batman, thereby quelling any rumors about his personal life. A few years later, in 1961, Kathy's niece Betty Kane was introduced as Batgirl, a sidekick for Batwoman, and a possible friend and companion for Robin. With Batwoman and Batgirl in the picture, the Wayne household suddenly had some chaperoning feminine energy. These characters were short-lived. After a while they were phased out when they were no longer deemed necessary, but they played their part in the evolving Batman saga. In our relaxed reminiscence, we see Kathy Kane's Batwoman riding her Batbike, matching Batman and Robin in bravery, and perhaps blowing a kiss to Batman after a caper well ended, much to Robin's youthful embarrassment. It adds a gentle touch of romance and family to Batman's life in those years, like a kindly aunt and cousin joining the adventure. Moreover, to further normalize Bruce Wayne's domestic life, the comics in 1964 introduced Aunt Harriet to live at Wayne Manor. Aunt Harriet, full name Harriet Cooper, was depicted as Dick Grayson's maternal aunt. She moved in as a kindly housekeeper, ostensibly to take care of Bruce and Dick. Behind the scenes, editor Julius Schwartz admitted that Aunt Harriet was added to dispel any lingering suspicions about two bachelors living together. If anyone asked, well, of course there's a motherly woman in the house too. Aunt Harriet was sweet, but also comically curious. She'd nearly stumble upon the Batcave entrance now and then, creating light tension in stories. Imagine Bruce and Dick scrambling to hide their costumes whenever Aunt Harriet came in with milk and cookies. But she never discovered their secret. She simply provided a nurturing presence, a warm plate of cookies waiting after a long night's patrol. In the soft ambience of our narrative, Aunt Harriet represents normalcy and care. You can imagine her humming a lullaby in Wayne Manor's halls, dusting the grandfather clock that secretly opens to the Batcave, none the wiser that Batman is just behind it. In that innocence, there's comfort. Even Batman had someone fussing that he get enough sleep and eat well, though he'd often sneak out anyway once Aunt Harriet's back was turned. By 1960, Batman had also been a founding member of the Justice League of America, joining forces with Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and Martian Manhunter. Although he often operates in shadows, Batman proved instrumental in big team-ups too. It's calming to think that even a brooding figure like Batman has friends to rely on when world crises loom. He's always prepared, always ready to help, and perhaps a bit paranoid. There's a famous saying in comics, given enough time to prepare, Batman can defeat anyone. This stems from his habit of devising contingency plans. In fact, Batman secretly created files on how to disable each of his fellow Justice League members if they ever went rogue. This distrustful diligence backfired in one storyline, Tower of Babel, but it underscores how Batman carries the weight of responsibility for every scenario. He even built an AI satellite named Brother Eye to watch superhumans from orbit, a plan that, unfortunately, went awry and caused him much regret. Yet, despite these heavy ideas, we can frame it gently. Batman cares so much for the safety of innocence that he will shoulder any burden, think of every risk, so that others can sleep peacefully. While Superman flies carefree in the sun, Batman lies awake at night, just like we are now in the night, pondering ways to keep everyone safe, even from themselves. In a way, he carries the worries so the rest of the world doesn't have to, a rather comforting thought, that someone so capable is out there, always planning protection. The 1,960 seconds ushered in a wildly different phase for Batman in pop culture, the era of camp and color, spurred by the hit 1966 Batman TV series. That show, starring Adam West as a straight-laced, unflappably polite Batman, embraced all the silliness of the comics and dialed it up to 11. Suddenly, Batman was a pop art icon, and Batmania swept the nation. Kids tuned in twice a week for cliffhanger adventures punctuated by pow and bam graphics. It was intentionally goofy and tongue-in-cheek, and it saved Batman's comic from potential doom. Just before the show, in 1964, Batman comics had been at their lowest ebb. Sales were dropping, and DC was considering ending the Batman series altogether. The comics had already attempted a new look revamp that year, giving Batman a sleek yellow oval behind the bat emblem on his chest, streamlining the artwork with artist Carmine Infantino's elegant touch, and removing some of the Xeneer elements farewell for a time, Batmite and Batwoman. This helped modernize Batman, but it was the television show that truly propelled Batman back into the spotlight. The success of the show meant the Batman comics from 1966 to 1968 mirrored its tone. They reintroduced villains like Riddler and Catwoman, with looks matching the TV actors, and they created Barbara Gordon as Batgirl in 1967, specifically because the TV network wanted a female hero on the show. Barbara Gordon's first appearance in Detective Comics #3 Feminine showed her innovatively donning a bat costume to save Bruce Wayne from a villain at a costume party. By day, Barbara was a headstrong librarian and Commissioner Gordon's daughter. By night, she became the dynamic Batgirl, complete with a fiery red wig as part of her disguise. She quickly became beloved in both comics and television, a symbol of female empowerment in an otherwise male-dominated heroic world. So, in the late 60 seconds, the Bat family consisted of Batman, Robin, and Batgirl, often depicted side by side, smiling and giving lessons at the end of a story. It was a bright, cheerful time. Many who grew up then recall it as fun. If you close your eyes, perhaps you see that era's Batman, Robin, and Batgirl standing in the sunlight on a Gotham rooftop, waving to appreciative citizens after foiling a fantastically absurd plot, perhaps King Tut's or Egghead's, villains invented for the TV show. It's a safe, almost childlike vision of Gotham, where even the bad guys felt like clowns rather than killers. The comics in those years had stories titled Batman's Greatest Blooper, and featured things like Batman and Robin surfing against the Joker, directly inspired by the TV show's outlandishness. This camp era was a soft pillow for Batman, but it didn't last very long. By 1969, the TV show was cancelled, and the Batman comics decided it was time for the Dark Knight to wake from the candy-colored dream and return to his roots as a creature of the night. Thus, as the 1970 seconds dawned, we entered a kind of Batman renaissance in the comics. The tone shifted to moody and gothic once more, though not overly grim, more a balance of mystery and adventure. Legendary writer Denny O'Neil and artist Neil Adams led this charge. They stripped away the last vestiges of camp. Robin was sent off to college, so Batman was largely operating solo in Gotham again, and the stories focused on crime, psychology, and atmosphere. Under O'Neil, Batman truly became the Dark Knight again, a silent guardian in the shadows. Many classic villains who had been neglected got reimagined in terrifying ways. For instance, O'Neil and Adams brought the Joker back to homicidal prominence with the acclaimed story The Joker's Five-Way Revenge in 1973, portraying him as a frightening psychopath after years of buffoonery. They also reintroduced Two-Face in 1971. He hadn't been seen since the 50 Seconds, and Harvey Dent's return was handled with tragedy and respect, reinstating him as one of Batman's most personal adversaries. In this era, new villains and nuanced allies emerged too. Perhaps the most significant new addition was Ra's al Ghul, introduced in 1971. Ra's al Ghul, whose name in Arabic means head of the demon, was unlike any foe Batman had faced. Sophisticated, eco-conscious, and dangerously intelligent. He was an immortal warlord leading the League of Assassins, and intriguingly, he knew Batman's secret identity almost from the start. In Ra's al Ghul's first storyline, he actually approaches Bruce Wayne not as an enemy, but as a concerned father. His daughter Talia al Ghul is in love with Batman, and Ra's, seeing Bruce's prowess, wants Batman to marry Talia and become his heir. It's a bizarre sort of family proposal amid an action-packed tale that takes Batman across the globe. In one memorable scene, often cited by fans, Ra's al Ghul and Batman strip to the waist and engage in an honor duel with swords in a desert. With Talia watching, a battle for Talia's hand, and for the fate of cities Ra's intends to cleanse. Batman wins the duel by the narrowest margin, spare Ra's life, and declines Ra's al Ghul's grand offer, of course. You might sense an almost mythic quality in these stories. Batman is cast as a true knight, chivalrous and determined, facing not a cackling clown, but a dignified demon's head. It added a rich new layer to Batman's world. Talia herself became a recurring figure, torn between loyalty to her father and love for Beloved, her pet name for Batman. In a quiet corner of continuity, years later, Bruce and Talia would have a son named Damian Wayne, but more on that soon. For now, imagine Batman standing under a desert moon, having earned the respect of an immortal enemy. There's an almost meditative calm in that image. Two warriors acknowledging each other's nobility. In the lore's context, Ra's al Ghul represented the weight of centuries on Batman's shoulders, but also the idea that Batman's values, mercy, justice without murder, could even humble a demon. The 1970 seconds also gave us the beloved character Lucius Fox, Bruce's business manager and friend, introduced in 1979 to handle Wayne Enterprises' affairs, and it brought back Catwoman in a more anti-heroic role as a sometime ally. Story arcs became more complex, the artwork more shadowy and elegant. Another notable event, in 1974, the comics decided to literally resurrect Alfred, who had actually been killed off in a 1964 story when DC was retooling the series. They did this to make way for Aunt Harriet's role, believe it or not. Alfred sacrificed himself to save Batman and Robin and died a hero. Then Aunt Harriet moved in. But fans missed Alfred dearly. So in 1966, an amusing sci-fi storyline brought Alfred back to life with a twist. When he was revived by a scientist, he emerged temporarily as a strange, pale villain called the Outsider, who psychically tormented Batman and Robin from the shadows before eventually being restored to his senses and to his old butler self. After that, everyone pretended nothing happened, and Alfred Pennyworth resumed making tea and dry quips in the manor as if he'd never left. It's a quirky footnote that even death could not keep Alfred from caring for his family. As the gentle night of our narration deepens, we drift into the 1,980 seconds, a time of transformation and reinvention for Batman on the page. In 1983, the second Robin, Jason Todd, was introduced. At first, Jason was virtually a copy of Dick Grayson's origin, another circus boy's parents killed by criminals, taken in by Bruce. After the reality-altering event, Crisis on Infinite Earths, 1985, Jason was reimagined as a tougher street kid whom Batman catches trying to steal the Batmobile's tires. Batman sees potential in this brash boy and trains him as Robin. Jason's run as Robin was tumultuous. He was written to be more headstrong and impulsive than Dick. Some readers found him difficult to empathize with. This led to one of the most shocking comic moments. DC held a telephone poll in 1988, allowing fans to vote whether Jason Todd would survive a story in which the Joker had brutally beaten him. Tragically, the vote, a slim margin of just 72 votes difference, came back in favor of Jason's death. In the infamous storyline, A Death in the Family, the Joker's cruelty reached a heartbreaking apex as Jason was killed. The world saw Batman experience profound failure and grief, elements rarely touched on so explicitly before. That sorrow would linger in the comics for years, making Batman even more driven and at times more brooding. Yet, even this dark cloud had a silver lining. In 2005, it was revealed that Jason Todd returned to life. Comics are, after all, the land of second chances. As the Red Hood, Jason adopted a vigilante approach that was harsher, even lethal towards criminals, creating an ongoing moral conflict with Batman. But tonight, we focus less on the violence of Jason's loss and more on the poignant fact that Batman's fans were so invested in the story that they literally held his partner's fate in their hands via telephone. It's a reminder of how Batman's world had become interactive and deeply personal to its audience. And in the aftermath, in the comics, there is a touching detail. Batman memorialized Jason by keeping Jason's Robin costume in a glass case in the Batcave, with an inscription, "A good soldier." In the hush of the Batcave, when all criminals are in Arkham and Batman is alone with his thoughts, he can look at that glass case and remember he fights not just to avenge his parents, but to honor the legacy of those he's lost along the way. Perhaps that thought is a solemn one, but also a gentle reassurance that Batman never forgets those he loves. Another cornerstone of the 1,980 seconds was Barbara Gordon, the original Batgirl. In the famous 1988 graphic novel, The Killing Joke, Barbara was shot by the Joker, an attack that left her paralyzed from the waist down. It was a cruel moment in the story, but from it, Barbara forged a new identity, refusing to be a victim, she reinvented herself as Oracle, a genius information broker and hacker who served as the tech-savvy backbone of the Bat family. Confined to a wheelchair, but not defeated, Barbara, as Oracle, built an international computer network, guiding not only Batman and Robin, but also other heroes, like the Birds of Prey team she founded, with mission plans, research, and remote support. In a sense, she became Batman's guardian angel in the wires, always watching out for him from afar. If you listen closely in our quiet tale, perhaps you can imagine the soft clicking of keys echoing in a clock tower, where Barbara sits bathed in a screen's glow, whispering advice into Batman's ear through the comms. Careful, there are 2 guards around the corner. It's a calming presence for Batman, and for us, to know that even when Batman is physically alone on the streets, he has friends in the ether guiding him. Barbara's resilience is an inspiring fact. Even a bullet couldn't silence her heroism. It merely transformed it, and eventually, many years later, she would regain the use of her legs and return to swinging as Batgirl. But that's a story for another night. The late 82nds also ushered in the era of the modern graphic novel for Batman. In 1986, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns presented an older, retired Batman coming back for one last fight in a dystopian future Gotham. It's a riveting, legendary tale, but also intense and not exactly soothing bedtime material. What it contributed to lore was immeasurable, though. It coined Batman's nickname, the Dark Knight, in the mainstream and depicted him as a mythic figure grappling with age and legacy. Frank Miller also wrote Batman, Year 1, 1987, a beautifully grounded retelling of Batman's first year fighting crime, focusing on his learning curve and his alliance with a then Lieutenant Jim Gordon. Year 1 is often considered the definitive origin story now, and from it we get details like Batman choosing a bat as his symbol because, when one startled him through a window, he remembered his father's advice that criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot, and thus a bat's image would strike fear. We also see in Year 1 a young Batman making mistakes, and Gordon, as a weary but idealistic cop, forming a bond with him. It's a humble, human start, and it reminds us that Batman's greatness wasn't born fully formed. It was honed through trial and error, patience and pain. In our late-night reflection, we can think of a young Bruce meditating after a bruising patrol, steadfastly pushing himself to be better every single day. His journey was incremental, from clumsy first outing to polished guardian, and that incremental improvement is a reassuring lesson that mastery comes with time and effort, something we can all internalize as we drift into dreams of bettering ourselves tomorrow. Now we softly enter the 1990 seconds, a decade of big events for Batman. Perhaps the most famous is the 1993 saga Nightfall, where Batman faced a foe named Bane, who was as cunning as he was strong. Bane engineered a brutal plan. He released all of Arkham Asylum's inmates in one night, forcing Batman into a marathon gauntlet against the likes of Joker, Scarecrow, Two-Face, and more, without rest. By the time Batman finally returned to Wayne Manor, exhausted and injured, Bane revealed himself and struck. In a climactic moment, Bane broke Batman's back, lifting him and bringing him down over his knee. This was one of the most startling scenes ever drawn in a Batman comic. The mighty Batman physically broken and rendered paraplegic, utterly defeated. Gotham suddenly had no Batman, and crime threatened to overwhelm all. But Bruce Wayne, being who he is, had a contingency even for this. During his recovery, he entrusted the mantle of Batman to a trusted, though relatively new ally, Jean-Paul Valley, also known as Azrael. Jean-Paul had been brainwashed from birth by a secret religious order, but Batman believed he could channel Jean-Paul's fierce skills for good. And so, a new Batman patrolled Gotham, one with a very different style. Jean-Paul Valley's Batman wore a high-tech armor with sharp claws and lethal weaponry, a far cry from Bruce's restraint. At first, he succeeded in defeating Bane with that advanced bat suit and protecting the city, but over time Jean-Paul's violence grew uncontrolled. He alienated Robin, Tim Drake, by then the third Robin, introduced in 1989, and tarnished Batman's reputation with his brutality. Bruce, upon healing through intensive therapy and mystical help, taking the time to mend both body and spirit, eventually returned to confront Jean-Paul, reclaiming the Batman identity in a non-violent duel of wits and skill, proving to Jean-Paul that the true Batman's strength is not in gadgets or rage, but in compassion, intellect, and self-control. Nightfall, though action-packed in description, carries a soothing moral at its end. Batman might falter, but he does not fall forever. With rest, support from his friends, like Dr. Chandra Kinsolving, who healed him, and Nightwing, who stood by him, and steadfast determination, Bruce rose again. The Batman who emerged was wiser about his own limits, and perhaps for a moment, as Bruce healed, he allowed himself something he rarely does, a moment of vulnerability and trust, leaning on the family he had built. He even let Dick Grayson, the original Robin, now Nightwing, fill in occasionally. It showed that Batman is not just a lone knight, but at the head of a family of heroes who can carry on his mission. In the Lullaby of Legacy, that is a comforting thought. The idea that Batman's spirit is bigger than one man and will endure through others when needed. The 1,990 seconds also saw the sprawling, year-long storyline No Man's Land. 1,999, when Gotham City was devastated by a massive earthquake, magnitude 7.6. In a prior story called Cataclysm, the U.S. government declared Gotham a lost cause, quarantined the entire city, and withdrew all government services. Gotham became a lawless ruin, literally a no man's land, isolated from the outside world. Most civilians evacuated, but many couldn't or wouldn't leave. Batman disappeared for several months, seeking solutions elsewhere, and in his absence, Gotham's worst criminals carved the city into fiefdoms. Eventually, Bruce returned, realizing he could not solve this crisis with money or politics alone, and vowed to take back his city block by block. During No Man's Land, Batman was not alone. It became a showcase of his allies. Oracle, Barbara, set up an information hub in a clock tower to coordinate everything. Nightwing, Robin, and a new Batgirl, not Barbara. This was Cassandra Cain, a mute daughter of assassins, who took up the Batgirl mantle with Batman's blessing. All fought to maintain pockets of order. Commissioner Gordon and the GCPD, cut off from the world, became true vigilantes themselves, maintaining blue-painted turf in parts of Gotham where law still reigned. Even some villains operated under uneasy truces. Poison Ivy protected orphans in Robinson Park, an ironic Eden amid the chaos. Night after night, through winter snow and spring rains, Batman and his family slowly reclaimed Gotham, lighting makeshift bat signals from barrels to inspire people when power was out. No Man's Land was a crucible that showed Batman's never-ending resolve and the loyalty he inspired in others. Eventually, their efforts paid off. Gotham was admitted to the United States, relief came, and the bat signal officially lit the sky again. In our soft retelling, No Man's Land feels like a long dark winter that the Bat family endured together, huddled around small fires of hope until the spring of civilization returned. We take comfort that even when an entire city collapsed, human spirit exemplified by these characters kept flickering and ultimately prevailed. Drifting into the early 2000s, we find more changes and full circle moments. Bruce Wayne, who had been a surrogate father to his Robins, at last had a biological son enter his life. Remember Talia al Ghul and the love between her and Bruce? Unbeknownst to Bruce, Talia had given birth to his child and raised the boy in secret within the League of Assassins. This boy, Damian Wayne, was introduced to comics in 2006. Damian was 10 years old, precocious and deadly, having been trained as an assassin from infancy. When Talia revealed Damian to Bruce, it was quite an adjustment for the Dark Knight. Here was a child with his eyes and the Al Ghul temper, trying to prove himself worthy as Bruce's heir. Over time, Damian comes to respect his father's no-killing rule, and even assumes the role of Robin, the fifth Robin, alongside a new Batman. More on that in a second. The fact that Batman, who once feared having a family because of his dangerous life, ended up with a blood son in the field, is remarkable. And in a sweet way, it shows how Batman has evolved, from lone avenger to a mentor and dad, juggling crime, fighting with parenthood. Damian at first was bratty and violent, but under Bruce's and Dick's guidance, he grew into a true hero. By imagining Bruce gently reading a bedtime story to Damian in Wayne Manor, perhaps Alfred's suggestion to bond more, we see a tender side of Batman rarely admitted, but always there. The nurturing father figure that started with Dick Grayson and lives on with his actual son. Damian's existence is a testament to Bruce's humanity. Beneath the cowl is a man who deeply loves his children, whether adopted or by blood, and would go to the ends of the earth for them. In 2008's big crossover story, Final Crisis, an event occurred which, for a time, took Bruce off the board. Confronting the cosmic tyrant Darkseid, Batman was struck by Darkseid's Omega beams and seemingly disintegrated. In truth, he was sent back in time, lost to the prehistoric past, but to the world, Batman was dead. This leads to a powerful moment in 2009, where Gotham needs a Batman, and the mantle must be passed. Naturally, Dick Grayson, the very first Robin, now grown into the capable Nightwing, is the one to step up. Dick dons the cape and cowl and becomes Batman, reluctantly at first, feeling unworthy of Bruce's legend, and Bruce's 10-year-old son Damian becomes the new Robin. Thus, for a period, Batman and Robin were actually Dick and Damian, not Bruce and Dick or Bruce and Tim. And a wonderful dynamic it was. For the first time, Batman was the more light-hearted one, because Dick has a sunnier personality, and Robin was the grim, intense one. Damian, raised by assassins, is serious beyond his years. It turned the classic partnership on its head, yet honored its core. They were still the dynamic duo, learning from each other. Dick proved himself a leader, and Damian learned to channel his aggression under Dick's gentle guidance. It's heartwarming that Bruce's legacy was in such good hands. When Bruce Wayne eventually made his way back to the present, his time travel ordeal is a wild tale where he becomes, among other things, a prehistoric cave, Batman, and a colonial witch hunter briefly. He found that Gotham had not only survived in his absence, but maybe even thrived. His protégés upheld his ideals brilliantly. Far from being upset, Bruce was proud. So proud that he had a new idea: Batman Incorporated. In 2010-2011, Bruce Wayne publicly announced that he would finance a global crime-fighting initiative. He didn't say he was Batman, but implied he was funding Batman. He essentially franchised the Batman concept, recruiting a team of Batman around the world. This concept was actually a modern riff on an old 1950 story where Batmen of all nations formed a club of global heroes inspired by Batman. Now it became official. Heroes like Knight and Squire in England, El Gaucho in Argentina, and others all received resources from Batman Incorporated to fight crime locally. It was Bruce's acknowledgement that the symbol of Batman had grown bigger than just him. How comforting to think of the bat symbol lighting up not just Gotham's skies, but shining as a beacon of justice across the globe. Like a network of guardians, each trained in Batman's methods, each sharing information. In our lullaby context, maybe imagine a montage of various cities at dawn: Tokyo, Paris, Johannesburg, and in each a silhouette with pointed ears watches from a rooftop, ready to protect. Batman's dream was not to fight forever, but to show that people everywhere can stand up against evil. Batman Incorporated was the realization of that dream, a world where everyone could be Batman in spirit. What a positive, inclusive notion to drift off with. The idea that anyone listening, in their own small way, can carry forward Batman's mission of helping others, no matter who or where they are. The 2010 seconds also ushered in the modern DC Universe reboots like the New 522011 and Rebirth 2016, which tweaked and refreshed Batman's continuity. A notable storyline early in the New 52 was the Court of Owls, 2011 to 2012. We learned of a chilling secret. For centuries, Gotham had been controlled in the shadows by a clandestine society of the rich and powerful, calling themselves the Court of Owls. They employed undead assassins called Talons and nested in hidden lairs in the city's oldest structures. The Court of Owls was like a dark mirror of the Wayne family legacy, claiming that this is their city, not Batman's. Batman's war with them was psychologically taxing. At one point, they drugged him and trapped him in an elaborate underground maze for over a week, nearly driving him insane. But Batman being Batman, he persevered and defeated the Owl's onslaught, proving that Gotham's soul could not be commandeered by tyrants, no matter how deeply rooted. The rhyme, "Beware the Court of Owls that watches all the time," became a whispered urban legend in comics, suggesting that even Batman can be watched by something in the dark. But once again, the moral was that Batman's willpower outlasted their machinations. He even discovered that one of their talents might have been his own distant relative, or perhaps even a lost brother, a mystery left hanging, which Bruce chose not to pursue, having faith in the family he knew, Dick, Tim, Damien. Over blood ties, he didn't. As we near the present in this journey, a few more interesting tidbits float by like leaves on a late autumn breeze. Did you know, for instance, that Gotham City got its name in the comics thanks to a simple phone book? In the 1,940 seconds, Bill Finger decided that Batman shouldn't live in a real city like New York. It should be a fictional city any reader could imagine as their own. Flipping through a New York phone directory, he randomly spotted an entry for Gotham Jewelers, and the name struck him, Gotham City. In truth, Gotham had been a nickname for New York for ages, meaning Goat's Town in an old folklore. But with that serendipitous pick, Gotham City was born on the page, a moody metropolis filled with Art Deco spires and gargoyles, equal parts glitz and grime. And here's another comforting piece of trivia. In the real world, on Batman's 80th anniversary in September 2019, cities around the globe projected the bat signal into their night skies. From Melbourne to London to Los Angeles, fans gathered and cheered as that iconic emblem lit up buildings and clouds. It was a tribute to how deeply Batman resonates with people everywhere, a modern myth shining bright. If you close your eyes now, you might fancy that you see a faint glow of a bat signal outside your window, assuring you that even in the darkest night, someone is out there watching over the world. There's also the charming matter of Batman's daily life. We often see him as mythic, but he has human touches too. For example, what's Batman's favorite food? A comic once slyly mentioned that Bruce Wayne's favorite dish is mulligatawny soup, a spiced Indian soup. Alfred, no doubt, makes it perfectly for him on cold evenings. And when not in costume, Bruce is often depicted attending elegant parties or doing meditation. His training regimen is intense, but in quiet times he enjoys classical music. These soft, humanizing details remind us that Batman is ultimately a man who likes a hot bowl of soup, who maybe even smiles privately at a good mystery novel by the fireplace. Now, as this soothing journey comes to a close, we reflect on how far Batman has come. From that first panel in 1939 to this very night, over 80 years have passed. Batman has evolved from a pulp vigilante into a multimedia icon, and one of the most recognizable fictional characters in the world. The comics themselves hit a milestone. Detective Comics, where it all began, published its 1000th issue in 2019, a testament to Batman's enduring appeal and the tireless creativity of all the writers and artists who have contributed. Through it all, certain constants remain that give Batman his strength. His unmatched willpower, often cited in comics as his true superpower, allows him to overcome fear and pain. His compassion, though hidden under a stern facade, drives him to mentor others and never give up on the goodness of people. And his preparation and intellect mean that no matter what threat arises, Batman likely has a plan and a backup plan. One fun example: Batman is polyglot. He has been shown to speak dozens of languages. By some accounts, around 40 languages in total, including some alien dialects, and even one language of animals. So if an innocent is crying for help in any tongue, Batman can respond. It's a detail that underscores how exhaustive his training has been, all to be the best protector he can be. We also recall that Bruce is not a lone knight, but at the center of a loving circle. Over the years, he informally adopted Dick Grayson and Tim Drake as his sons, and in many story continuities he legally did so, making them Dick Grayson Wayne and Tim Drake Wayne, part of his family in name as well as spirit. He has a trusted foster daughter in Cassandra Cain, a loyal friend in Commissioner Jim Gordon, who has shown the bat signal for decades now, effectively acting as Batman's partner in the GCPD, and so many allies who would walk through fire for him. Why? Because of the example he sets. In a quiet moment in the comics, Superman once reflected that Batman, who seems so full of anger, actually has the biggest heart of them all. He feels pain and love so deeply, but channels it into doing endless good. That is Batman's true legacy. As we end our exploration, let's imagine one last serene scene. Late at night, high atop Wayne Manor, Bruce Wayne stands on a balcony, looking out over the twinkling lights of Gotham. The city is finally calm after a long day. Bruce is not in costume now. He's in a robe, perhaps a mug of that favorite soup or tea in hand, steam curling in the cool air. Alfred quietly steps up next to him and asks if everything is all right. Bruce, in a rare moment of contentment, nods and even gives a small smile. Down in the city, the bat signal switches off. Commissioner Gordon, having decided to finally go to bed, secure that tonight was safe. Bruce closes his eyes and breathes in the night air, proud of what he and his family have accomplished and determined to greet whatever tomorrow brings. In the sky above, the pale moon shines, partially cloaked by a gentle cloud that vaguely forms the shape of a bat. Tonight, we have journeyed through 100 fascinating tales and facts of Batman's lore, from the darkness of Crime Alley to the colorful escapades of the Silver Age, from secret societies to public triumphs. Each fact is like a star in Batman's night sky, together forming the constellation of the Dark Knight. Feel free to let these stars twinkle in your mind as you drift off. You are safe knowing that in the world of our dreams, Batman is out there on the rooftops, keeping watch. And as the Dark Knight himself would softly say at the end of a long night, rest now, the dawn is coming, and you're under the night's protection. Sleep well, under the watchful gaze of the bat. Good night.